Welcome back, this is Tucker. Let's talk weather. Erin remains a major hurricane in the Atlantic and it continues to move west. We talk about the latest path it's on and the impacts it will bring to the US. Welcome back, and if you've been following Erin recently, you know the storm has already reached Category 5 status. Well, the good news here is that it has weakened a little bit since then, but we're still looking at a major hurricane as it continues to move west and approach the United States. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to make landfall, but the impacts are still going to be significant along the East Coast. So in this video, we're taking a look at the latest track and those impacts that you should be watching for, and we'll also give you a look at the next potential system that's coming out of the Atlantic. Erin's latest track moves a bit farther west, which takes it closer to the US. As you can see, however, this storm is still expected to stay in the ocean and actually really taking an ideal route north of the islands to the west of Bermuda and still staying off the East Coast. That said, it's still a powerful storm, expected to be a major hurricane through Wednesday here, with impacts that will be along the entire East Coast from Tuesday through Friday as it makes its pass. And even without landfall, it does get reasonably close here on Wednesday into Thursday, and it's in this window where the East Coast will feel the greatest effects from Erin. And again, we'll talk about what you should be ready for here in just a moment. Before we go too far though, I want to show you our next potential threat. And in the next week, it's likely to develop into our next cyclone. It's a ways out here, but it's forming in another favorable area without a lot of shear. And we'll be watching this system in the next week as it's also going to take a path similar to Erin with potential impacts on the islands and the US. But we will get to that one a little bit later. Let's talk about what Erin's about to bring. By the way, guys, if you haven't subscribed, consider doing so. I'm a meteorologist. You'll get good information here, and you can ask any question you have in the comments. I'm going to start you off here with a look at Erin's rainfall, which has never been expected to be a big deal, but here's what we're seeing in case you're curious. Bahamas get some rain. Looking at a chance for some showers here Wednesday and Thursday in the Northeast. This would be called a predecessor rain event. I'm not saying it's likely to happen right now, but it's a possibility in the Northeast. Just be thinking about that. Watch your forecast Wednesday and Thursday. Here's our storm on Wednesday and Thursday, though, making its way up the East Coast. And while it could bring some showers to the Outer Banks, this thing remains pretty compact and stays generally rainy over the ocean. But that would be the least of several impacts it's likely to bring. Let's take a look at what's next. As you might imagine, waves, yeah, they're going to be a big deal here. Bahamas really get blasted. And when we talk about waves, you're looking at the green and yellow colors. Those are pretty significant waves, as high as 15 feet. But once you get to the red coloration, those are your 20-foot waves. That's where we really talk about some impacts, including erosion and potential damage on the coastlines, depending on how exposed they are. And here on the Outer Banks, we're talking about that potential Wednesday and Thursday, and that's certainly going to be where we have some of the biggest impacts. As the wind field of Erin continues to expand, heading late into the week, we may be talking about some reasonably significant impacts from waves, even on the islands and perhaps even Cape Cod out in Massachusetts. This would be on Friday before our storm begins to move on. In addition to all of this, the rip current risk is going to be very high, and that's going to be really across the entire week. Even in the Northeast here on Tuesday, we're already talking about increased rip current risks, and that's likely to be a factor into Saturday as our storm moves away. So beaches this upcoming weekend, maybe not the best place to be if you want to get in the water. Probably better for some pools instead. And you know what? Here's a crazy stat on Erin too that I was doing some research on and discovered yesterday. There have been 14 other Category 5 hurricanes that have occurred in the Atlantic in the month of August. Erin would be the very first to not make landfall as a hurricane somewhere, assuming it takes the likely path and stays over the ocean. Just a pretty mind-boggling stat there, and think about how fortunate we are here that we're not talking about a hurricane landfall, because this storm really could have been a lot worse. And I will say, it's not out of here yet, so stay vigilant, but things are looking about as good as they can right now. As I mentioned before, there is another system that we do need to watch after Erin, so I'm going to give you a little preview of what we're keeping an eye on as we get into the following week. And what you're looking at here is each of these red numbers indicating basically the center of a storm system. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a hurricane, but here's Erin quite clearly. Our next system you're going to see evolve out here. So let me put this into motion and you'll begin to notice it pop up. And actually you can already begin to see it coming off the west coast. Here it is right here. I say west coast, I really mean the west coast of Africa. Here's Erin. You're going to see that go out into the ocean, but keep an eye on this guy down in the the southern portion of the Atlantic. This is in the North Atlantic. You get what I'm saying, though. It's going to be moving our direction through this week. Still no strong agreement on what occurs with it, but what we're going to be keeping an eye on is possible development as it gets closer here to the islands. Does not look like an Erin where it develops right off the bat, and that's why guidance does not have a strong signal here. But you're looking at Sunday the 24th, and this is where you begin to see some hints of a storm developing. Now there's a decent chance it just gets swept off into the Atlantic and nothing really comes of it. But there is also a fairly good chance that it will continue moving westwards, and we'll have to be keeping an eye on this area out here getting closer to the islands and even the southeastern U.S. And this would be at the start of the following week. So we're talking like 8-9 days out here. Just something we'll be keeping an eye on. Otherwise, the Atlantic, no strong signals for storms right now. But that wave, I would say, has a better chance of impacting the United States than Erin. But I will also say there is not as much power out there for this storm to feed off of. So it's a bit of a give and take, but something we'll need to keep an eye on, and I'll keep you updated on too as we move forward. All right, guys, we're wrapping things up there. I hope this helps you stay ahead of the storm. Of course, if you have any questions, even if it's just about what weather's happening over the mainland, so to speak, feel free to ask. We've just been covering hurricanes more because that's what's going on right now. But I'm still keeping an eye on everything. So as always, ask your questions in the comments. And as always, I'll see you right back here in a couple days with the next update.